And when I started to take a step back and ask myself, am I living a life based upon what I really want to do and what's important to me, or am I living a life based upon what I think others kind of want me to do? This resilience thing has nothing to do with our physicality, right? This is really a mental decision.
Welcome to the Be Better broadcast. Let me ask you a question to kick this thing off. What would you do with more brain power? What if you could take the knowledge and the information and the experience and the skills and abilities that you have now and supercharge them 10x, 20x, 30x, 50x? To what extent, you may ask? I don't know. We're going to talk about it today to figure out how much you can expand your brain power, because our guest today, his name is DJ Logory, and he's from Rochester, New York. Now he lives down in Florida, which we'll talk about that as well. But DJ believes that you can train your brain the same way that you can train your physical muscles at the gym. And I believe him. I subscribe to the same philosophy. I've practiced this in my life. I've noticed the results. And you might be wondering, well, how can I use this enhanced brain power in my life? Well, what if you could enhance your brain power for your career? What if you could enhance what you know and the knowledge you have for your business? What if you could enhance what you know about your family to be a better dad, a better mom, a better brother, sister, son, daughter, whatever it might be? More brain power is going to lead you to a better life with more options, with better decision-making power. And that's what we're going to dive into today. When you take even just one thing away from this conversation with DJ, all that we ask is you share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You are the reason the Be Better broadcast has grown to nearly 340 episodes over the past 2.5 years, because you were the best part of the Be Better team. Our guest today is DJ Logory. He is a mental fitness maestro and the founder of the Acres of Diamonds. He's here to share invaluable strategies on turbocharging your brain power, navigating the complexities of social media, and cultivating mental resilience. DJ hosts two podcasts, that's wild, Libraries and Weight Rooms, as well as the Acres of Diamonds, further showcasing his expertise in mental and physical wellness. And we're going to talk about how those two things go together. Without further ado, DJ, it's great to have you on the show, brother.
Brandon, thank you so much, man, for allowing me to be here today. Really excited to dive into a little bit of mental and physical fitness. And so thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. We met kind of offhand from the Grow Getters event with Ben Albert, who is also in Rochester. I'm curious, have you met Ben Albert in person, or was that like a networking virtual kind of deal?
I'm yet to meet Ben Albert in person. I would love to meet Ben Albert in person. But no, it was kind of funny how I decided to actually go to that networking event. I had never really done one before. And it was part of me wanting to just start doing things that kind of made me uncomfortable, right? It was different. And I had seen Ben kind of post about it. And I was like, hey, maybe this is a nice little step into some networking that might be a little bit of discomfort. And look, it led us to today. So I was very happy that I had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, because just to paint the picture for everybody, a lot of people when they network, and let me tell you, and this is no disrespect to people out there who do this, it was me at one point too. There's a lot of chronic networkers out there who just love going to networking event after networking event. They go there, they might listen, they might not even talk to people, whatever it may be. And they just do that over and over. It's kind of like how people just go to events over and over and over, and they don't necessarily make changes based on the event. Let me tell you what you did that was very different than what most people do. You sent me a message afterwards. You listened to the recording, number one, which most people don't do that. And then you messaged me and said, hey, really enjoyed your session at the Grow Getters event. And I was checking you out. I was looking at all the things that you're up to with your corporate training and your individual coaching and all those things. And I was like, wow, I would really love to talk to DJ on my show. So this happened. You're in Florida. I'm in New York. I mean, this happened really. I don't believe in luck. I don't believe in just things happening. I believe that everything happens that's meant to happen, right? And that generally happens from action that's taken. So I respect your going out of your way in order to reach out to be here, because I think that's a huge thing when it comes to mental strength and brain power, is taking action, even if you're unsure of what the result might be. But you did that as one of your first networking events. And then recently you just went to California. You said you just got back today from California for an in-person mastermind. So was that out of your comfort zone to go and do something like that?
Yeah, that was probably the biggest stretch out of my own comfort zone that I've done ever. It's a mastermind group that I just recently joined a couple weeks ago. Justin Shenik is the one who organizes it. And it was in San Diego, and we basically have 2 in-person meetings every year. And then on a monthly basis, we have 2 virtual sessions where we talk about our business, personal life, then we have guest speakers and things like that. And so part of the program was this in-person meeting. And I was like, traveling alone, right? Getting my own Airbnb, right? Figuring out all of these things, and then really participating in the actual sessions on Friday and Saturday. Something I've never done before, right? And I thought to myself, I go, well, in order to get what I want in my life, I need to intentionally seek out fear, discomfort, uncomfortability, right? And I said, here's a great opportunity, as well as learning from people who are smarter from a professional standpoint, right? So I said, here's this opportunity. We have to do this, right? It was almost like there wasn't a choice, which I think is something very important when it comes to mental and emotional resilience, is limiting our choices so then we don't actually make the wrong choice.
Wow.
Yeah, which I think is very, very key when it comes to like discipline and resilience.
So, okay, so you said one of the biggest keys is eliminating your choices. So give me an example. What does that look like? How can you say that in a different way?
So this morning, great example of this morning. I woke up, I had just flown home from San Diego the day before, was kind of exhausted, literally just a full day of travel. I ended up going to bed at probably 9:30 at night. And each morning I wake up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym. Woke up at 5 a.m. and I rolled out of bed, and I was literally just kind of sitting at the edge of my bed. And I was like, I could use some more sleep. I was like, I could use another 2 hours or so. And there was a choice of essentially going back to bed, right, for those 2 hours, or there was the choice of going to the gym. And in my head, I said, there isn't a choice, right, of going back to bed. I simply just said, there is a choice of going to the gym. And right then and there, it just kind of clicked and said, all right, I'm going to the gym. And I literally just got up and then got my stuff and I went to the gym, right? Yeah. So it's kind of like if you want to have a healthy diet, right? There's an apple and a piece of pizza. We know what the choice is. It's just a matter of, are we actually going to make that decision and go through with the correct choice? Even though having that pizza ties into a ton of emotion, right? There's a lot of pleasure, a lot of enjoyment with eating that pizza. Yet we know that if we want to maintain that healthy diet, the apple is the decision, because the apple is going to lead us to better choices moving forward. So I think a huge piece of resilience and toughness and mental fitness is eliminating the choices that we actually have, so then we stay disciplined to those routines that we know are going to get us where we want to go.
Were you always the person who could eliminate the one choice and just go for the gym or go for the apple? Or is this something that you found in this recent or later stage in your current life?
I think I found it when I started to really assess what I wanted with my life, and when I started to take a step back and ask myself, am I living a life based upon what I really want to do and what's important to me, or am I living a life based upon what I think others kind of want me to do? And when I took that, when I kind of slowed down to want to go faster, that's when I realized it's like, all right, there's less choices here than I think I actually need to think about in a greater scheme, right? If I want to have a certain body, there are certain things that I need to do, right? I need to get enough sleep. I need to go to the gym. I need to eat, X amount of calories, watch my macros, all of these things. That's because that became important to me, right? If I want my mental fitness to maintain this level of sanity, right? This level of decision-making, here's what I have to do on a daily basis, right? I want to start reading more. I want to start doing mental fitness training on a daily basis. I want to take some time to actually visualize and meditate on some of the things that I want, and almost feel the emotion, like almost get myself to tears to the point where it's real, right? Like I've already gotten to that point, and I'm just essentially experiencing the emotional outburst of what it feels like. So I think, to answer your question, right, that type of behavior started to kick in when I basically said, all right, I'm going to die one day, right? Like to be grim, I was like, I'm going to die one day. I'm not going to be here. It's like, why don't I start just making these decisions now, so then I can kind of live a little bit more peaceful and more joyful life moving forward.
Wow. That's powerful. It's funny you say that, because the last my last person I talked to on the show, his name is Dean Leber. He's from this local area, and he's a leadership expert, and he has a whiteboard next to him, and at the very top of his whiteboard it says, "You will be dead soon."
Yeah.
And he sees that every single day.
Yeah.
And it is grim, but I mean, is it? I mean, we're all gonna die, and we all are making choices up until that point. So what choices will we make so that when we're at that final part of our life, whatever that looks like, maybe you know you're there, maybe you don't know you're there, but will you be able to say, I'm happy with these choices that I made up until now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that, so unfortunately, I had a situation happen in my life where I had a family member who I was very close with pass away unexpectedly. And when that happened, I literally remembered the day like I can describe it in great detail, the emotion, right? It was because of that heightened emotion, right? I can really describe it and understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, I remember literally getting the phone call, being told the news, and then walking back into my class in college and sitting down.
Wow.
And like looking up at the class and like holding back tears and thinking to myself, like, we're all going to die one day.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing now to make sure that I really freaking lived? Right. And it almost gets me emotional just thinking about it. Right. Like Matthew McConaughey said this in his book, Green Lights. He said, once we realize that our time is going to end one day, we actually start to live more with the time that we essentially have right now. Right. And I think that's such an important thing, right? To understand, listen, there's going to be some fear, right? There's going to be some discomfort. There's going to be uncomfortable moments of our life. There's going to be things that we're not that great at. There's going to be things that we fail at. Tons of these things. Yet that is almost the beauty of it.
Yes.
Right? We can't know those things without having success, having joy, having pleasure, right? I always talk about like taking an ice bath. I literally just wrote an email about this yesterday or a couple of days ago. Taking an ice bath is painful because we know the joy of taking a warm, hot shower.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? We need to experience the beauty and the grace and the gentleness of taking a beautiful, warm, hot shower. Because when you get in that ice bath, it's going to hurt like hell.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you're going to have those dualities. And I think that's the exact same thing with life, where we're going to have those really high highs, those moments where we're like, man, I'm doing it. Right? Like I'm figuring myself out. I'm helping others. I'm impacting others. I'm being genuine. I'm being authentic. At the same time, we're going to have moments where it's like, man, I'm struggling right now.
Yeah.
I just messed up with this, or I just broke up with my significant other. I failed this test. I lost my job. Like I'm really struggling. And I think it's tough to say, yet we need both of them, right? To create that whole human experience.
Well said. Absolutely. Whenever I meet someone like you who has traveled down the path that you've traveled, and I know very little about your path because we just met about 30 minutes ago, but from what I do know of you and your bio and what you do to help teams and individuals and this idea of building your mental and emotional power and health, I always think, how did this person find himself here? Out of all the things that you could be doing, you could be a doctor, you could be an engineer, you could be so many different things in traditional career paths, but you chose entrepreneur. And then again, going back to choices, and then you chose, I want to be a resilience coach, essentially, in many different facets. I always know that there was something in your life that caused you to head down this particular path. So you could just tell me, but I'm curious, did you went to school in Rochester, you said?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
What did you go to college for?
So I actually went to college for marketing.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Went to college for marketing. And I think the reason that I almost want to say created this version of myself was because I think this is what I needed most when I was younger. And I don't think I had necessarily the courage or even the awareness to really realize, hey, maybe I'm struggling with my emotional resilience, or maybe I'm struggling with my mental fitness, or maybe I am struggling with making the right decisions to essentially align more with what my values are. And I think what ended up happening was I graduated college, and kind of to make a really long story short, I really started to struggle with a lot of mental health stuff. I had no idea why. I had great friends around me. I had a great support system with my family. I had just essentially lost an internship, and I say lost because there were two interns and they gave it to another intern. So the meaning I gave in my brain was I failed, right?
Yeah.
I'm not smart, right? So really kind of hurt me. And I remember using social media as this numbing or this buffer to not necessarily address what I was feeling, right?
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was, so my business partners and I, we call it mental McDonald's, right? If we eat McDonald's for our body 24/7, 365, what do we think is going to happen to our body, right? It's going to get unfit, right? It's going to not be too good, right? That Morgan Spurlock guy did the supersize me for 30 days, right? And it was brutal, right?
Yeah.
So imagine if you do that for your mind, right? Imagine if we do that on 4, 5, 6 hours a day on our phone, going through social media, listening to mainstream media, following out-of-date leadership styles, right? That's essentially going to make us mentally unfit. And that was what I was doing to myself, right?
Wow.
And I was completely unconscious that I was doing it to myself. And what I realized was I was basically I was unconsciously making myself feel bad.
Interesting.
And that was where, and I got to this point where like I called my mom and I was like, I'm not doing well. And I was like, I don't even know why. I was like, I have no idea why I'm like, this is happening. And what ended up happening was I basically had reached out to a mentor of mine, who is now my business partner in Acres of Diamonds.
Great.
Basically said, hey, I'm struggling. Like, I don't know what's going on. And we met and we literally just started to talk about emotional resilience and leadership. And I realized in those moments of talking about those things that were important to me and real to me, I started to feel the energy come back up. I started to feel my heart get full again. I started to feel my brain start to fire differently. And I said, okay, I'm literally saving myself. I was like, I'm literally getting myself to a point where now I can see like some momentum here. And I didn't even know really where I was going at, because at that point, you know, this is it, you graduate college and I think we expect to go into like the job of our field.
Yeah.
I didn't have a job at all. Right. And I was working construction with a buddy of mine and I was like, what the hell, dude? You just did 4 years of marketing.
Yeah.
You're academic, all American, like all this stuff. Right. And this is where it got to you. And I was really in these nasty ruts of my mind. And because of my mentor, Scott Gibbs, and kind of getting to this point of realizing what I enjoyed and what really lit me up, it ended up kind of redirecting my path down this incredibly impactful and meaningful direction of mental fitness and emotional resilience. And like I said, I kind of became this person because this is what I needed.
Yeah. Well said, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild how a conversation with one conversation can change the trajectory of your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't even realize it in the moment, but then you look back and realize, wow, it was that conversation that changed everything for me.
It really did. And what it ended up blossoming into was, after that first conversation, I remember texting Scott and being like, hey, can I get you again for another 2 hours next Saturday? And Scott was so gracious and one of the best human beings and minds that I've ever met. And he said, yep. He goes, meet me at Starbucks at 8 a.m. on Saturday, this date. And being a young man who was 22, 23, I'm like, oh, so that means I can't go out Friday. Right. So then my decisions. So this is where like that start of like, you don't really have those choices. That's where I think it started to kind of kick in, when I started to really understand what was important to me. Right. It became tough when all of my buddies were getting ready to go out and I was going to bed at 9:30, 10 o'clock because I had to wake up at 6, 7 a.m. right on a Saturday. And that was where I started to really ask myself, I was like, all right, Deej, like, you're making some big decisions here, right? Because I love going out with my friends, right? I love being social with them.
Yeah.
Yet this became more important to me from an emotional standpoint, right? And so for the next 2 years, we met basically every single Saturday morning and then sometimes Wednesday nights, and basically talked about what we're talking about now, and came to this idea of, hey, could this be applicable to other people? Right. And I kind of got this, I'm like, am I the only one who's dealing with this? And it felt very low. And Scott was like, no, like, here's how I'm dealing with it. Right. And so we kind of connected on this very deep level. And then I was like, all right, there's got to be other people who are experiencing these types of negative self-talk, right? Or or beliefs about themselves, right? Am I not doing enough? Where am I going in life? And how do I start to connect this idea with these people? And that essentially is what birthed Acres of Diamonds.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so let me ask you, when you were in that place of you were checking your social medias, you use that as, like, you use the metaphor of that was the supersize me at McDonald's, but for your mind. So when you were there and then now where you are today here, I know that that transformation can take time. You just mentioned you were 22, 23. I went through a very similar transformation when I was 21. I had a mentor in my life who just happened to work at the same company. He was my leader at the time. And he met with me several times each week. We had these conversations. We went to the gym. We worked out. He helped me to move up in the company, and that changed my entire paradigm. Everything changed at that point. So I understand the power of a mentor. And I know that my transformation took time as well. So I'm curious, let's talk about the steps now that you took, because I think that they're applicable, like you said, to everybody. Maybe the sequence is different. Maybe you can shed some light on that as well. But what did the process and framework look like to go from where you were to where you are? Is there a place where everyone should begin?
So I'm a firm believer of the three fundamentals. And I actually got this from Brian Johnson in the Optimize and Heroic program, which I recently completed about a year ago. And one of their key components was the fundamentals, and it was eating, moving, and sleeping. And I remember around this time of when I was meeting with Scott, I was starting to take a step back and look at every single facet of my life. Like, I literally remember creating an Excel sheet, and I reached out to one of my buddies who was a financial advisor, and I said, hey, do you guys have Excel sheets where you guys like give your clients where they can see how much money they're spending on like a monthly basis? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, can you send me that? And he's like, no. And I said, all right, well, just tell me what is in the sheet. And I was like, and I want to literally just copy it. And so he literally like just communicated what was in the sheet. And so I made this like sheet of basically how much money am I spending on a weekly basis, and then a monthly basis, how much money am I bringing in? What type of food am I actually eating? What am I doing each day for my body? What am I doing each day for my mind? And that actually is what ended up creating the idea of libraries and weight rooms, because libraries is where we go to essentially increase our mental fitness, right? We read books, we study things, and weight rooms is where we go to increase our physical fitness, right? We lift weights, we run on treadmills, things like that. And so I realized that the two areas of my life that were the most important to me were my mental fitness and my physical fitness. And so what I started to do was basically on a daily basis, do something each day that was going to improve it, and start small, right? And this is something like when I'm coaching people on like getting better at discipline and routines, don't say, all right, I'm going to go to the gym 6 days a week for 2.5 hours a session, right? And just go hard right off the bat, because you're going to snap, right? I'm like, literally make this super small. Like I remember like the first thing I started doing was I said, I'm going to read 3 pages of a book each day. And I remember telling it to Scott, my business partner, and he was like, 3 pages? He's like, that's what you're starting with? And I said, let me start small. I said, just let me start at 3. And then I said, and I'm going to go. And I was pretty consistent with my physical fitness at that point. And so I said, this is just going to augment my physical fitness, right? And so I started to read essentially every day. And that literally what it started to do was it started to make me talk better. And that's what I thought was really important, was because I was getting exposed to so many words on a daily basis, because the 3 turned into 5, turned into 10, turned into half an hour, right? I then became more confident with the way I was presenting myself. And that was really important to me, because I think confidence is ultimately what is going to help us really develop ourselves moving forward, right? Confidence requires courage and evidence, lots of things when it goes into confidence. Yet I think there are little things that we can do, such as going to the gym consistently, watching our diet, and reading. Those are 3 things that I think are very, very important to not only our confidence, our consistency, but also our mental landscape. I think is super important. And then the other piece to it was sleeping as well. It was eating, moving, and sleeping were the 3 fundamentals that I really, really started to focus on. And I remember basically saying, how do I get good at sleeping? I bought a Garmin, right? Bought a Fitbit, right? Just started to track it. and just get really good at it. With the nutrition, I started to count my macros and just understand a little bit more about nutrition, right? Non-nutritionist, I just want to understand what's the 101 course of nutrition.
Yeah.
And get good at that. What's the 101 course of exercise and working out? And I've been doing that for a while because I played football, because I'd been in sports, and exercise was something that improved my confidence and also made me feel good about myself, right? It made me look better, made me feel better, made me act better, behave better. So I would say those three things were really what changed. What was the transformation was I really started to dial in my nutrition and my eating, my movement from both a physical standpoint, from going to the gym, and movement from both a mental standpoint of reading, and then dialing in the sleep.
Amazing. I love that. And I love the idea of starting small. And even when Scott was like 3 pages, like, come on, man, I'm sure that that's evolved from that point. And I'm sure that you sat down some days and you had a little bit more time, and maybe you read 10 pages, 15, you got to a really good part, you read 20. So that concept of, okay, great. If we take those 3 fundamentals of eating, moving, and sleeping. And it's interesting to me because out of those 3 fundamentals, there isn't anything that's directly mental in those 3 things. Maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe you could tell me, but eating, moving, and sleeping, is there a correlation between those 3 things and your mental power?
So I think the kind of like the connection point of them is it is a decision that comes from here. Like I always say our physical body is essentially a representation of what's going on up here. Right. So in order to literally, like, your alarm goes off, in order to go and like hit your alarm, right? Your mind is telling your body, right, or your brain, right? I'm not that that aware of that exact science yet, but it's telling your body, right, to go hit that alarm. Then you're going to actually get up and go to the gym. Then you're going to come home and you're going to eat a proper breakfast, right? Have your protein, have your carbs, have your fats. Then you're going to make a decision. All right, I'm going to read, right? I'm going to do some meditation. And then you go through your whole day. And then once it gets to that end of that day, you're going to make sure that your phone is off 30 minutes before you go to bed, right? So you get into some deeper sleep. You're going to make sure that you're not watching Netflix from 5 o'clock to 9:30, right? You're going to make these decisions that are all essentially a mental decision that are then carried out into the physical form. And that's, I think, where that connection kind of comes to. And I think the interesting thing is I once asked my sister Scott and I asked my sister. So my sister is an incredible human being. She's much smarter, tougher, and better than me. We asked her, we said, what is toughness? And we asked her to write a page about toughness. And in one of the lines, she said some of the toughest people she knows cannot do 1 push-up.
Wow.
And that was such a powerful thing because it basically came back to, all right, this resilience thing has nothing to do with our physicality. Right? This is really a mental decision. And one of the first group coaching programs that we'd ever created, one of the modules that we had was toughness. And we literally would get people into a group and we would talk about what it meant to be toughness. And one of the questions we asked, or what it meant to be tough, one of the questions we asked was, who's the toughest person you know? And we talked about grandmas and sisters and dads and teachers and coaches. And none of it had to do with physicality. All of it was about the adversity that they had overcome, or the decisions that they had made, the uncomfortable things that they had to do. None of it was about how many push-ups they could do.
Yeah.
And I think that was such a huge eye-opener to me, was just how much of our life is ultimately decided up here and then carried out into the world. Right. So that's why, like, when we talk about supercharging our brain and emotional resilience, like, that's how important it is.
Yeah.
Right.
I completely get it 100%. And at the same time, the flip side of this coin, because that's very true. You might think of the toughest person being your great grandma who went through the Holocaust and survived, or something along those lines. And maybe grandma wasn't in the best shape, right? Obviously, if she was in that situation, she probably didn't have much food to even go from. So yes, toughness can be derived there. And at the same time, when I think about conversations with people who aren't happy with where they are. And this was me. When I was that 21-year-old Brandon, I was 260 pounds. I was unhappy. I was depressed at the time. Like what you mentioned with scrolling through social media at that time, it was subconscious. You didn't think to yourself as you did it, I shouldn't be doing this. This is making me sad. But you look back and you're able to see that. I'm able to look back and see when I was at my heaviest point, and when I looked in the mirror, I was not happy with myself. And when I talk to people today, and I work with salespeople from all over, many different organizations, many different sales styles, those who aren't happy, one of the biggest things is, well, I stopped going to the gym. And I ask them, how do you move your body? How do you work your body? How do you move? How often do you sweat each day? As weird as that is. They say, well, I used to, but now I don't, or I never have, and I'm not sure where to begin. So a lot of the suffering that I see comes from the inability to take control of your physical body, and maybe not even the inability to take control, but the lack of education on where to begin. I was the person where I didn't have a fitness routine locked in. I never went to the gym. Oh, I won't say that. I went to the gym here and there. I had a Planet Fitness membership when I was like 17, 18, 19. I'd go with my mom sometimes when I lived with her when I was 17, 18. But I never really went to the gym. You know, I wasn't there with, okay, this is what I'm doing today. This is my goal. This is what I want to achieve. It was only until I found that mentor who helped me to really not master my body, but really make a huge dent in my physical fitness that I started to feel better about myself. And when I look at people today, and not even just look at them, but when I talk to them, those who are honest, it's very rare that I find somebody who hasn't locked in their physical body that is happy with their life. And maybe they won't say I'm not happy with my life, but they'll say things like I'm low on energy, or I'm not getting sleep, or I just can't balance being a mom or a dad with my career, with my business. So I find that physicality, while it isn't the ultimate definition of toughness, it certainly plays a giant key role in that being tough. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, Brandon, that's a great point. That's a great point to make, because I think too, the decision to physically change yourself, I think there's a lot of intention behind it, right? Where we have to be intentional with why am I actually doing this? Like, there's a deeper reason why people work out, I believe. Like personally, the reason that I worked out was because I had a graphic injury when I was younger, and I created this limiting belief that I wasn't strong. And I literally went to the gym in order to disprove that belief. And I remember like walking into the gym for the first time. I was a super skinny kid and was very awkward, very uncomfortable, was a late bloomer. And I was like, this is what I think is literally going to make me feel better. Right? All the tough guys in school, they worked out. All the celebrities, they worked out. All the athletes, they worked out. It was like, this just seems like the right thing to do. That was essentially my intention. And it was going to fulfill that gap that I had in me, right? That limiting belief. And I think the physicality part of life, like my love language is physical touch, right? I grew up in a family where when my father sees me, he grabs me. He goes, "Hey, you working out still?" Right? My aunts, my uncles, right? We squeeze each other, right? And so that was like, it was almost like I wanted to maintain a physicality, not only for myself, but I wanted to be strong for them.
Yeah.
Right. I there was one part of my life where I stopped working out. And I remember like exactly the time frame. It was literally after my freshman football season until essentially the start of our spring ball. So about a 3-month window. I had stopped working out midway through our football season just because it was kind of exhausting. And I wasn't mentally resilient enough to get to that point where, hey, we need to continue to work out through the football season. I remember going into Christmas break with one of my best friends, Nick Prince, and we went to the YMCA and we started bench pressing. I remember I did 135 pounds like 6 times and I was exhausted. And it was one of the first times where I had felt those, hey, I'm not strong, those limiting beliefs come up again. Yeah. And it scared the absolute shit out of me. It scared me more than anything. And right then and there, I literally just went nuts for like 6 months, got it all back and said, okay, like I'm back again, right? I needed that physicality to feel like I was making progress in the direction that I wanted to go. So to your point, I think that's a very, very important piece for people to recognize is our physical bodies is what is the vehicle, right? Do what we need to do to create that physical vehicle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great point, man. I love that 100%.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that I want to talk to you about. I wish we had more time in general, but we could always have you back too. But I do want to ask you, when you were going through that period where you started with 3 pages
Mm-hmm.
and to where you are now, I'm curious to hear when it comes to the concepts of just bettering oneself. I always like to ask people, was there any specific book that you read that really hit home for you, or maybe you recommended it to others and it hit home for them? You're like, what's the 1, maybe 2 max books that really left a positive impact on you in your life?
So first book, hands down, was, so started with Think and Grow Rich. I think we all start with that, right? Yep. The first book that I actually read, because I really didn't like reading. I was kind of like, I feel like I could do more with this times. And that was just a limiting belief that I had. And I had a friend of mine actually say, who I really looked up to, say, start reading, it will change your life. And literally the day he texted me that, I was actually with my grandma, and she gave me The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And that was the first book that I had actually read. Now, that's not the book that really changed me, though. The book that really, really changed me was called Deliberate Discomfort. And it's by Jason Van Camp. And he's an ex-Navy SEAL. And the way that the book is written is he has maybe 10 Navy SEALs, Green Berets, Army Rangers write a chapter of this book. And then he has like mental toughness experts, neuroscientists, doctors, basically have little vignettes like into what each SEAL, Beret, or Ranger is saying to kind of connect, hey, they intentionally chose this level of discomfort. Here's what was really going on in their brain, right? Here's what the decisions that were going on. And I remember reading that book and really grasping the art of intentionally making yourself uncomfortable. And which sounds weird in and of itself, but I realized that I was living my life very comfortable up to that point. And that was when I was like, all right, start doing things that are just uncomfortable. Like in all honesty, it was uncomfortable to read 3 pages a day because I hadn't just really connected with it yet. Right. And then once it got kind of comfortable, once I got used to it, I said, all right, let's bump it up to 7. Let's bump it up to 13. Right. So there's this saying called another level, another devil. And so basically when I got to the next level, it became uncomfortable again. And when I felt the discomfort, I'm like, okay, this is where I need to be. And reading that book allowed me to better understand that principle and how it could be applied to just about every area of your life, right? Like where are you really comfortable? All right, shake it up, right? Where are you really in a routine? What's the next level of that look like? And I'm a big routine guy, and I'm a very big rational and structured guy. So I battle with myself a lot with this because I want to continue to make sure I'm growing, yet I want to continue to make sure that I'm being consistent with the things that I'm doing. And so that book really was the first, I think, opening up to, hey, find where there's some discomfort and then go to it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. Great summary too of that book. I never heard of Jason Van Camp, but I just looked up the book. For those listening, again, it's called Deliberate Discomfort by Jason B.A. Van Camp is his full name. It's with Andy Simons as well. I'm going to have a link in the description to this book, but it's got a ton of ratings. I can't believe I've never heard of him or this book. It's wild. I'm going to check it out. And I want to check it out. And then as I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, I know that when I get this book, I'm going to be challenged and it's going to tell me or say I should do things that are going to make me uncomfortable, which I'm not going to want to do. But I'm curious, like, what do you still do on a daily basis now in order to get yourself out of your comfort zone? Is there like something you do daily, or is it like a monthly check-in in those areas where you are comfortable? Like, what does it look like now? How do you get yourself uncomfortable now?
So I think the easiest answer to that is 5 a.m. wake up, and after my CrossFit workout in the morning, take an ice bath. And It's literally like every morning, like just this morning, I remember we have a sauna at the gym that I go to and this ice bath. And I was like, you know what, maybe I'll go in the sauna today. And I remember sitting there and it was like, nope, there isn't a choice here, right? The sauna is nice and warm and you sweat. And I said, and the ice bath is extremely painful, right? And you recover. And I was like, there isn't a choice. I said, just go in the ice bath, right? And I went into the ice bath. And the ice bath is, you have to, shatter. I take a cinder block and I have to shatter the ice on the top of the surface to actually get into the ice bath.
Wow.
And it's in the back of the gym. It's pitch black. It's outside. It's a very like ominous type of feel when you walk out there.
Wow.
But I know that it's like, I'm intentionally doing this because I know it's uncomfortable and it freaking hurts a lot. And it's painful.
Wow.
Right? And so I do that every morning. And then I would say really being consistent with exercise is something that I've really started to really hammer down. I don't think I've missed a workout in 4 years. It's just something that I've just, it kind of like to that choice, right? There is no choice here, right? This is what I'm doing. And I've kind of started to adopt this new type of method of training where I work out strength wise in the morning. And then at night, I like to go for a 3 to 5 mile run out in the sun. And sometimes I do it completely silent and just let my thoughts kind of go and just see what happens. Sometimes I have a podcast or some music going, but I don't want to do that, right? Like that's the interesting thing is I kind of just like when my day's done, kind of want to just make dinner, right? And just start to relax and wind down. But I know that if I do that, it's going to help me in some other area of my life.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing that I think is really important about this concept of intentionally making ourselves uncomfortable. And when I say like intentionally making yourselves uncomfortable, a big piece of that too is asking yourself honest, like hard questions, really understanding where some of your emotions are coming from.
What's a hard question? Give me an example.
Like a hard question could be, why am I not being the leader that I know I can be?
Oh my God.
Right.
That is a hard question.
Right. And like another question I was once asked was, when do you give up?
Ooh.
Right. Like things like that, where you're like, I don't want to answer that. Like, can I just go watch Netflix for a couple hours?
That makes me emotional just thinking about those two questions.
Literally gets the emotions going. Right. And I've had to answer those questions. And that is literally the intentional, deliberate discomfort. Right. So it isn't necessarily just always putting yourself in physical discomfort, right? It's intentionally putting yourself into these spaces of, ooh, I don't want to shine a light on that scary monster. That's kind of nasty in there, right? Just leave it over there and just let it unconsciously control me for the rest of my life and I'll be okay. Right? That's the type of things that I think apply from like the mental aspect of intentionally making yourself uncomfortable. The great gift about the work that we get to do is we get to create a space to have people do that for themselves. Like we get to literally, in the groups that we run and in the one-on-one coaching, we will literally say, here's 3 things that I'm ridiculously embarrassed about.
And you have people write these things down.
And I mean, if they're taking notes and things like that, but we will basically present to them to allow them to be vulnerable, right? And we can get into a whole piece about vulnerability, but we will basically say, here's how we are intentionally making ourselves uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. I ask myself why I'm not being the father that I need to be to my children. Right. I ask myself, why am I not being consistent with the things that I know I need to be consistent with?
Yeah.
What are the emotions that or what are the events that happened to me when I was 5, 6, 7 years old that completely created this facade of a limiting belief that I held on to that I'm trying to unwork and untangle? Right. And we will literally tell them what those are in our life. And it gives them the space and the acceptance that they can do it too.
So what's one of the most common things that you'll hear from people when you say, write down 3 things that make you embarrassed? What's a common one that you'll hear?
So like one of the things is, I'm not enough. That's a really, and maybe embarrassed isn't the right word. Maybe it's more the thing that I don't want to necessarily talk about. And one of the things that we see a lot is, I'm not enough. And I think, I don't want to speak for everybody here, but I feel like we all can kind of connect to that on a certain level.
Yeah.
Right. Like I've been coached and invested in a lot of entrepreneurs and programs and these elite people. And even some of the smartest people in the world still feel that sometimes. Right. And that is a part. And when you get a group of people, 10, 12 people together, and you have 3, 4, 5 people say, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And the other 5 people are like, I've kind of felt that too.
Mm.
Right? It creates this space where it's like, all right, we're all not trying to be big, tough, strong, successful people right now. We're literally realizing that we're humans. All right. And we're going to have insecurities. We're going to have things that we're not good at. We're going to have moments of our life that we wish we maybe could have made a better decision in, yet we made the best decision that we could with the information we had in that moment. And this platform and this space is created where it's like, all right, now we've gotten to this point of we are vulnerable with each other. We can now start to trust one another because we're not trying to be these big, impressive people. And now we can really start to make some progress moving forward.
Can I ask you this? Is the preface is not being enough a bad thing? And I'll go into it by saying this. I was talking to a person I respect recently, and I made a joke and said to him, like, you don't know me. And then he said, I know everything I need to know about you. And I was like, oh, really? I said, what do you know? And he said, I know that you'll never be satisfied with where you are. I know that you're always just going to be chasing more and the next thing and the next thing. And it hit me. It was one of those other emotional moments where I was like, wow, that was it, because the conversation wasn't deep until this point. Mm-hmm. Like we were having bro talk, and then he said that deep phrase, and I was like, he's right. He's right. I am obsessed with growth. I'm obsessed with that next thing. Mm-hmm. I always want more. And to me, the way I look at it is, yes, I can see how that can be a harmful thing to want more always, because no matter what you get or when you reach your goal, you're always thinking, what's next? But I find the enjoyment in the process of getting more and building more and having more. And is it a bad thing to never feel like we're enough? Because right now, if you ask me, is where you are in business enough? Absolutely not. Is where you are with health enough? Absolutely not. Have you made enough money? Absolutely not. Like, and I don't see myself saying yes to any of those questions at any point in time. So is not being enough a bad thing always?
So that's a great question. And I think when you said to, I had a buddy once tell me the top of Success Mountain is kind of lonely. And he was the guy who actually told me to read. And so, I thought that was really interesting. And there's a book too. So this is the second book that I would recommend that really kind of changed me. It was called The Gap and the Gain. And I'm not sure if you've read it, Brandon, but it was written by Ben Sullivan and Dan Hardy, I believe, are the two individuals who wrote it. Or it might be Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy. I believe those are the two authors. And the general premise of the book was, do you measure yourself, your success essentially, in the gap or the gain? And I thought that concept was so powerful because basically what they were saying was a ton of high achievers are constantly measuring themselves in the gap. Right? They're millionaires. They've created these really successful businesses. They've impacted a ton of people, yet they notice the things that they haven't done yet. And then there's the other people who are living in the gain. And they are actively looking for their accomplishments, their achievements, the people that they've impacted. And they don't do that as a matter of, look at how great I am. They do that as a matter of, here's where I'm at. Right? Here's what I'm proud of. Right? It's good to be happy with your accomplishments moving forward, right? We don't always have, it's kind of like that person who gets the 99 questions right, but then they focus on the one they got wrong.
Wow.
Right? And so when I read that book, a lot of things changed as well, where I started to keep the thank you cards that I would get from clients. If any client ever sent us a card, I would always keep it, right? And I display it just so I knew that I was in the game. Right. And my father really helped me a lot with this too. And when he would talk about, he would always say, I've been wealthy for my whole life, right? Because of the people he had around him, because of the mentors, because of his profession, right? And his family. And so I tried to actively just live in the game, even though, to your point, there's still a ton of things I want to do.
Yeah.
Right? So we kind of got to this point, and Scott, my business partner, and I, we've talked a lot about this, and we've talked in groups about this, where we are enough in this moment, and I'm excited as hell to go get some more.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. You're a profound person. And,
Well, thank you,
and
brother.
I say that because it's very clear. It's very clear that you're very sharp, and you have a great way of going about answering the questions that I ask you without saying, Brandon, I think you're right, or Brandon, I think you're wrong. You're really good at saying, I can see where you're coming from, and I read this book that, and you go into that, and it just, you're the perfect person to be speaking on mental toughness is really the point of what I'm saying here. And I've greatly enjoyed this conversation. And yeah, I never heard that book either. The Gap and the Gain. It's like what you said, by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy. Ben Hardy wrote another book that's really good. It's called Who, Not How.
Mm.
And a great book. And I listened to it. That was the only book I've ever listened to or read from him. So I'm going to check this one out too. And I'll have a link in the description for that book as well, guys. But that is so true, to focus on where you are winning,
Mm-hmm.
but not saying I'm done. But you realize there's more to do that you're excited about. But at the same time, you can be happy and satisfied with what you've achieved up until now. Because in reality, and for most people, you can look at where you are now and you can say, I have something, or I do something today that I didn't have in the past. But how often do we stop and slow down and really look at what we've built up until this point and have been grateful for it, or have been proud of ourselves for having accomplished that thing? And it's so true, man. It just really puts you into a different emotional state when you think about what you've done.
It really does. Mm-hmm.
That's great, dude. I could talk to you forever.
Yes, I completely agree.
So let me ask you this: with what you do with the Acres of Diamonds, okay, you talked very lightly about how you help people, and when you get groups together, you ask them those questions, and you really get into the nitty gritty, and you help people to change their mental game. That's awesome. Who do you help, and what does it look like? Because let's say there's Susie out there from HR who's like, wow, I would love for DJ to come in and speak to our team. Who do you help, and what does that look like?
So we kind of came up with this term a couple weeks ago, because that was the question that was the uncomfortable question we were asking ourselves. We were saying, who are we actually helping? And we realized what we're really helping is we're helping the disruptors. And a disruptor is essentially a person or a team or a business who's tired of the old ways of, hey, stress and anxiety need to be a part of your life. They have to be a part of your life. And we say, do they really need to be? Right? I agree. Stress is important to a certain degree. And when we feel anxiety, sometimes it causes us into action, things like that. And is there a better way of looking at this? And so we work with the people who believe that there is a better way of looking at this. And so sometimes, like a lot of the corporations and the businesses that we work with, they're businesses that like to do things differently. Like they actively look for different things to do. And some of the individuals that I've worked with, they are people who actively are maybe in a rut and are ready to look for something different. And that is really important, because when we say like the term mental fitness, people go, what's mental fitness? And mental fitness is essentially the way we handle challenge with a more emotional resilience and curiosity, right? So like, for example, when you said, right, I don't disagree or agree with you, that's me actively trying to be mentally fit and say yes, and then explore curiosity.
Yeah.
Right? That's one of the things that we actually work on people through, because we all have our own views of everything. Nobody's 100% right with, whatever that perspective is. And so those businesses and those people, those disruptors, those people who are okay with going into a little bit of newfound territory, going into something where this is not mainstream, this is something different. And that is really the type of person that we're trying to work with, because I've had people who we've had businesses and we've had groups and we've had individuals who have not been those types of people. And they've kind of fallen behind in the consistency of what this type of work deals with. Yeah. And you can tell just kind of when you meet, you can tell kind of, I think, on the surface, a little bit of when you really meet somebody, if this person is a disruptor, if they like to think differently, are they humble? Are they vulnerable? Are they willing to be taught something? Are they willing to be the student if the teacher appears? these are the types of things that we try to make note of when we are actually talking to people to see if they're interested in going through our whole mental fitness program. And so that's really you could say the avatar or the profile of the type of person that we try to look for.
So tell me, what does a program look like with Acres of Diamonds? How does it lay out? Is it a one-time? Is it overtime? Give me a look at how this flows.
So in the beginning of 2020, we launched our first essentially emotionally intelligent leadership group. We literally did it. Scott and I had launched it basically because we just wanted to test it to see if there was something there.
Yeah.
And we did it with a local high school group, and it was fantastic. And we realized that there was something there. We just didn't essentially know exactly what it was yet. And so over the next 2 to 3 years into 2023 today, we started to basically create these modules of emotionally intelligent leadership skills. And as we started to work ourselves through these groups, we came across this company called Positive Intelligence. And Positive Intelligence, have you heard of Positive Intelligence?
I've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah. So Positive Intelligence, they're a technology company who created a mental fitness app. And so what we did is Scott and myself invested in this app. We went through the whole program and realized a lot of the stuff we were teaching aligned very nicely with the cadence of this program. And so then I said, well, what if we created basically a mental fitness and emotionally intelligent leadership experience that like nobody's ever experienced before? Like taking EQ leadership and mental fitness, intertwining them together and helping people solve maybe not only their leadership challenges, but also some of their personal and professional challenges that they might be experiencing in work and outside of work. And so we kind of created this hybrid program. And basically what we do is we work people through the 8-week program. So it's actually a 6-week program, but we've tailored it. We've made it completely customized.
Oh, cool.
So we use probably 50% of Positive Intelligence stuff. And then we have 50% of our stuff. So we have like bonus videos. We have very specific questions we ask. And there's an app that essentially guides you through this full 8-week experience. And
wow,
so,
that's great.
Yeah, it's very well laid out. There's like podcasts and audios that people listen to. And there's these things called PQ reps, which are essentially really concentrating on your senses for 10 seconds at a time. That's essentially how you build mental fitness. It kind of brings your attention back to center. So like, for example, right before our call, Brandon, I did PQ reps to get myself centered, right? So then I was in my highest focus and PQ channel. So then I could really, feel your energy, be emotionally intelligent, be here. And that's what we help people do. And so we do this in group settings with businesses who are disruptors, right? So this isn't for everybody. This, if you're the company who likes to keep traditional ways the way they are, then this is not for you, right? But if you are those businesses who are like, we need something different. Our people are really struggling, right? And maybe they don't even want to tell us they're struggling. But what we have found is when you give somebody the opportunity to say, hey, do you want to talk about emotional resilience? And we try to be careful with the term mental health because sometimes that can push people away, in all honesty.
Sure.
We say, do you guys want to know how to handle challenge better in your personal and professional lives? Do you guys want to talk about some of your negative self-talk, some of the things that might be popping up in your head that you maybe have never taken the time to really look at? And Brandon, I can tell you, it has been a overwhelming yes. The majority of people want to actually talk about this, but they want to do it in the setting where they won't be judged.
Yes.
And that's the important thing. Like as facilitators, Scott and I did this for 2 years up until we basically said, hey, let's do this for a business. And we were working with, our friends and families. And so we needed to create this decision of creating a safe spot, right? A non-judgmental area where I'm not going to judge you. And I really hope that you don't judge me, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be vulnerable, right? And I hope that inspires you to be vulnerable, right? We're not going to force you into vulnerability, yet we ask people, go 10%, right? What does 10% look like? And I can genuinely say that when there's a couple of weeks where we talk about events that happened to us in our lives that we initially thought were bad, that ended up giving us one of the greatest rewards and positive outcomes we could ever experience.
Yep.
That is where we see people say, I had this one story that was kind of but this story is really, and they always, like, I've literally never seen somebody not pick that deeper story because that space has been created. And so we do this on a group setting with these disruptor businesses, and typically we meet with L&D specialists and HR professionals to basically explain, hey, this is what we're going to do. And we then work them through the 8-week program. And then there's some additional stuff that we can do beyond the 8 weeks with teams and sales and leadership and persuasion, some extended mental fitness stuff. And
Cool.
So we do that on a group setting, and then we do it. We've just recently started to do it on a one-on-one setting. So if people don't want to wait for a group, hey, we can work you through this fairly quickly with some of our coaches. So that's kind of the bird's eye view of the whole experience.
Very innovative. I love that flow. That's awesome how you've integrated using the app to help guide the flow while you incorporate your processes inside of that at the same time. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So for the person who's like, this sounds really great, DJ, how do I reach out to you? Where's the best place to start the conversation?
So I think anybody can follow me on Instagram too. I'm actively like putting little mental fitness things out on Instagram. It's just at DJ Logory. You can email me too, dj@youracresofdiamonds.com. I will answer any emails and things like that. One of the things that we do that people seem to really like is we send out mental fitness tips on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Cool. And we basically, they're very quick emails. And so our slogan is be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. So these are designed to be read in under 30 seconds. So we're not writing an essay. And basically how we write these is we tell like a little funny story, and then we connect it to how mental fitness actually helped us in that
wow.
story. And so some of them are funny, some of them are really deep, some of them are pretty simple. But people seem to really, really enjoy those. So you can sign up for them. They're completely free, and we just start sending them to you right off the bat. And you can go to yourdailydiamonds.com, and cool. That's the actual opt-in. And our actual website just is youracresofdiamonds.com.
Awesome, man. I'm going to have a link in the description to those websites so you guys can reach out to DJ. There's also a link to those books that he mentioned here, those 2 really great books. And DJ, it was great meeting you. Great talking to you before the show. And thank you for just bringing it on the show, man. We were talking and I was like, dude, we got to record because we're already talking about some great things here. And I'm really glad that we did, brother. And I can't wait to have you back. And I wish you safe travels for your trip back to Rochester tonight. And it was great meeting you, brother. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate it.
Guys, you have a framework here to go from where you are now to where it is you want to be when it comes to your overall mental fitness and your resilience, whether you want to be, like we mentioned at the beginning, a greater leader, a greater business owner, whether you want to ask yourself, how can I go from focusing on the gap to focusing on the gain, whether you want to learn how to manage your self-talk and what should you do first and how much of this thing should I do at the very beginning. You know to start small, you know to take small baby steps and slowly build up on that. And maybe you do it in odd numbers like DJ does with the 3 to the 7 to the 13. I was going to ask him, is there a thing you have with odd numbers? But I never got to ask him. Maybe that'll be for round 2 on the podcast. If you took even just one thing away from this conversation with DJ and I, then please share this show with just one other person who could use it as well, because you are the best part of the Be Better team. All the links are in the description for you to go check out, to connect with DJ and check out those books that we talked about. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.